I'd like to call you and the committee's attention to the home of Corky and Molly Haddon. This is what it looked like on August 28th, 2005. This is what it looked like the afternoon of Monday, day after. Corky and Molly had $650,000 worth of insurance, homeowners insurance on that home. 17 months after the event of that storm, they've been paid nothing. This is the home of Jody and Betty Benvenuti, about 180 years old. It survived no telling how many hurricanes in its life. This is what it looked like the day before the storm. This is what it looked like the day after. Jody is in the insurance business, so he wisely bought a lot of insurance for that home. He had $586,000, which he thought was the full replacement value. 17 months after the storm, he's been paid nothing. What do they have in common with a U.S. congressman, a United States senator, a federal judge, and thousands of other people? The people who built their houses to spec, who paid their federal flood insurance policy, had a homeowner's policy, because in hurricane country you don't know whether it's going to be the wind or the water that gets you. So you had your bets with both. And like thousands of other people in the weeks after the storm, one after another, were told by their private insurers, we're not going to pay you. See, I think that contributed to a massive fraud against folks like Corky, against folks like Jody, but against the taxpayers too, to Mr. Miller's point. You see, under the federal Write Your Own program, we allow the private insurance companies to write the policy. That saves the nation, the flood insurance policy, that saves the nation the trouble of having people to write that policy. We pay them a premium for that. But the problem is we also allow them to adjudicate the claim. We let State Farms, Nationwide, USAA, and others go out to a piece of property like the Benvenutis, like the Haddons, and determine how is the house destroyed. Now, in some instances, in very limited instances, people stayed behind and actually lived to tell about it. And in those limited instances where a person could give a sworn testimony that I saw my house blow away before the water got paid, the water blew before the water got here, they were paid. But not very many people lived to tell that story. Most people got the heck out of there. So for the people like Corky, for the people like Jody who got out of there as they were instructed by their nation, they got nothing. The insurance companies conspired to defraud them. They conspired to defraud the taxpayer, and let me tell you how. Within weeks of the storm, State Farm and others issued memoranda to their claims adjusters that whenever they could see wind and water had been there, to blame all of the damage on water. That creates two problems. Number one, for these people with homeowners policies, the wind damage that obviously occurred in the 5 hours of hurricane-force winds that hit their houses before the storm surge got there is being totally ignored. But to Mr. Miller's point, they have a responsibility under the law for a fair adjudication of that claim. So when a company issues a memorandum to their inspectors to ignore wind damage, blame it all on the water, they are, by their own admission, sticking the taxpayers with bills that State Farm, Allstate, Nationwide, and others should have paid. That's where the fraud against the taxpayers comes in. So, Mr. Chairman, what I'm going to ask your committee to do is there are claims adjusters who walked away from $250,000 a year jobs, which in South Mississippi is a lot of money. There are actually two sisters by the name of Rigsby. And they walked away from their job because they were so disgusted with, on a day-after-day basis, having to go tell people that they knew had houses that were damaged by wind. They blame it all on the water so that they only got their flood insurance policy and none of their wind policy. They were so disgusted with that action done by their employer, Renfro & Company, which did work for State Farm, that they walked away from their jobs and said, we're not going to do this anymore. I'd like you to subpoena the Rigsby sisters. I'd like you to subpoena the people from State Farm and Allstate Nationwide. How can they pass out a memorandum after already promising our nation that they would have a fair adjudication of the claim? How can they send in a memorandum to their own employees saying, blame it all on the water, and that way the taxpayer has to pay? I'd like you to look into the antitrust. Again, they are exempt from the antitrust law, so again, is it really fair that State Farm can call up Allstate and call up Nationwide and call up USAA and say, you know what, if you don't pay claims and you don't pay claims, then I won't have to pay claims? Under the existing law, that is allowed. It's wrong as all get out, and it should be illegal. So, Mr. Chairman, and lastly, I would like our nation to look into all perils insurance. To Mr. Miller's point, if you've checked in California, you'll notice that 53% of all Americans live in coastal America. So what happened in Mississippi could happen in Maine, has already happened in New York, has already happened in North Carolina, has already happened in Alabama. It happened 4 times in Florida in '04. So it really could come to California one day. And is this how you want your constituents to be treated? Is this how you want the taxpayers of the whole nation to be treated? If they're going to pull out of a coastal America on a state-by-state basis and say we're not going to protect homeowners anymore from anything other than theft or fire, then maybe there is a vacuum that our nation ought to fill, just like in the 1960s when our nation stepped in to provide federal flood insurance because the private sector didn't want that job anymore. And since half of all Americans are affected by this, isn't it time for this Congress to look into it? Mr. Jindal, Mr. Jefferson did an excellent job of talking about how much the rates have gone up just for people who still want to get fire insurance, still for people who want to get theft insurance. And think about the irony here. We as a nation tell people you have to have insurance if you have a federally backed mortgage. And yet we're saying on the flip side, we as a nation are incapable of regulating insurance. We're going to let the states do it. So there are 50 different standards for what's right and wrong, plus you throw in the territories. So there's a lot that needs to be changed with this. But I would ask you to put yourself in the shoes of these folks who after 17 months haven't gotten a dime, who built their houses the way they should have, who paid their premiums, who when the nation said you need to get the heck out of here, got out of there. And because they weren't there to witness the destruction of their home, didn't get a dime. Mr. Chairman, I've laid a lot on your plate, but I know you're more than capable of making all this happen. Thank you for this hearing.
Well, we thank you. We thank all 3 of you for your testimony, and I think we're more than capable of documenting what has occurred, and then hopefully we'll have some ideas for the other committees, subcommittees about some responses that need to be taken also.